Good afternoon. Thank you very much, all of you, for being here. I would like to go over the format for today's forum. The order in which the candidates make statements or answer questions was determined in advance by random drawing. The questions were provided to the candidates in advance to allow for a fuller development of their responses and their positions and understanding of the issues before them. The purpose of the forum is to advance the understanding by the candidates of city issues. City and state governments serve the same constituents, though their roles are different but complementary. Today's purpose is not to surprise the candidates or to focus on candidate views of other candidates. We are interested in hearing how each candidate would propose to address these important issues and work with cities for the common good of all Oregonians. So the format will be as follows. The candidates will have 3 minutes for an opening statement, and they may choose to sit at their chairs, or you may choose to use the podium. You will then be asked 5 questions. The order of response will rotate, and each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question. At the conclusion of the question, of all of the questions, each candidate will then have an opportunity to make a 3-minute closing statement. And again, that closing statement can be done at your seat, or you can choose to use the podium. All responses will be directed to the question and not to other candidates. We are interested in what your position and approach is, and not your view of your opponent's approach or view. To respect the need to give each candidate an equal opportunity to answer questions and make their statements, candidates will be asked to stop should they exceed the time limit. A random drawing was held to determine the order of the presentation, and that order will be rotated. And finally, as I mentioned, the timekeeping will be directed at the front of the podium or the front of the audience with red and yellow cards, the yellow signifying 15 seconds remaining and the red signifying time's up. So now I'd like to move to the opening statements. And first on the podium is Mr. Cord. Thank you.
She flies with her own wings. How many of you know where that statement comes from? A few of you. Good. This is Oregon's state motto. My question is, does she? Does Oregon fly with her own wings, or has she become dependent upon the federal government to support her? If dependent, then she is not free, but under the control of another. She is tethered from being able to fulfill her full potential, restricted from becoming self-governing and self-sufficient. There is no reason why Oregon should not be soaring with the abundant resources we have. We have compromised our freedoms and allowed the federal Washington, D.C. to dictate their wishes, not ours. Our non-representing representatives have not listened to the voice of we the people, but of the special interest groups who have an agenda to control every aspect of our lives. Oregon has been sold out by these certain special interest groups, resulting in our economic demise and loss of freedoms. Many of the citizens of this great state are rightfully angry. They have lost their jobs, their homes, and many have lost their hope. People I have met have shared portions of their stories with me, and I have found it heart-wrenching. The losses are not due to their lack of ability or desire to work. It is due to the lack of sustainable jobs. I understand fully what it is like to wonder if you have enough money to pay your mortgage or to put food on the table. It is not, nor should it ever be, within the power of government, any government, to rob the people of their God-given abilities, resources, and dreams. But this is what has taken place and is taking place. Government needs to get out of the way and allow the people to be free. We, the people, know how to manage our resources without the continual constriction or restriction of government. If the government would simply get out of the way, our economy would flourish with healthy, responsible stewardship of our natural resources. Private sector employment would be healthy, and more income taxes would be paid to maintain public services. The opportunity for Oregonians to prosper would significantly improve, and Oregon would once again be, as she should be, free and flying with her own wings. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Cord. Mr. Wagner, please.
Thank you for inviting me here. I'm very honored that you took the time to host this forum. I appreciate it. Two people were standing on the observation deck of the skyscraper, leaning over the rail, and they were enjoying the view. One of them, an ordinary citizen, another a politician. And suddenly the railing broke, and they both fell over the side of the building. The ordinary man, a natural skeptic, realized that he was about to die, and he made peace with his creator. The politician, on the other hand, was last seen whizzing past the third floor, screaming, "Everything's going great so far." Oregon faces an innumerable amount of challenges, many of which are not even by our own creation. We have, at the national level, over $110 trillion in unfunded liabilities. And we can expect that those liabilities are going to be sent here because the people in Washington, D.C. cannot take care of them. There is no rate of taxation, no rate of production that can actually fulfill the liabilities that we hold with our unpaid pensions, our unpaid Social Security, our unpaid Medicare, and all of our nominal debts. And so we are going to struggle with this in Oregon. And eventually our foreign creditors are going to consider our insolvency something they can't ignore anymore, and our ability to borrow is going to disappear as well. And we are dependent upon this system of this monetary system as it exists. We get a lot of our revenue siphoned back to us from the federal government. And in the interim, what we've had over the last few decades, I can best characterize as a kleptocracy. A lot of these resources, though paid, do not actually arrive for their original intent. The money that's borrowed is distributed for things that will not persevere. We're going to suffer for abiding this, and our prosperity depends on us setting aside these practices immediately, because the future is going to be even worse the longer we extend and pretend that these completely insolvable issues of debt do not exist. We can't borrow our way to prosperity. More debt is not going to help us. And in summary, things are not going great. And we have a lot of issues that we're going to discuss today that are immediate concerns, but the ones that are coming in the future will be even harder to deal with. And we need to learn how to deal with them pragmatically and honestly and face the reality that's ahead of us. Basically, our current system is insolvent, and we still have parasites attached to us. The definition of insanity is doing the exact same thing over and over again, anticipating that you are going to get a different result. As it stands right now, we're whizzing past the third floor. Would you like to do something different for a change?
Thank you very much. Governor Kitzhaber.
I'd like to thank the League of Oregon Cities for providing this great opportunity today. This is a very important election. These are very difficult times, and clearly you do have a choice on November 2nd. Cities are at the heart of our economic development strategies, and we're going to have to work together very, very closely in order to get past this recession and move the state forward. But we actually have a long history of accomplishment in the past. Together we created the Oregon Livability Initiative, the Oregon Solutions, and the 21st Century Initiative Fund that innovated regulation at the local level, that provided the opportunity to reinvest infrastructure at the city and county level. We made progress siting wind farms in eastern Oregon. We prepared Martin Luther King Boulevard for mixed-use development. And we provided resources to develop downtowns throughout the state of Oregon, from Medford to Ashland to Grants Pass and to Springfield. Over the past several weeks, I've released a number of detailed strategies on how to move our state forward, how to deliver critical services, how to improve the performance of our educational system, how to reduce the costs of education, healthcare, and energy, and to create an investment-based approach to our schools, and also how to reform our tax code to provide some stability to our source of public financing. To achieve that is going to be difficult. We need a governor who can start on day one and hit the ground running. We need to remember that we are in the center of a deep fiscal crisis. We're at the low point of our fiscal resources. We are probably at the high point of human need in terms of food stamps, the Oregon Health Plan, and things like unemployment insurance. I believe that at the end of the day, you will find that there is only one candidate who has the capacity and the judgment and the experience to step in and lead the state of Oregon. And with all due respect, I don't believe this critical moment in our time calls for a governor with no meaningful experience in managing large organizations, in overseeing large budgets, in creating jobs, and in engaging with legislators and other public officials. That's why I'm running. I believe that my experiences, my perspective, a few hard lessons learned along the way, gives me the opportunity to address the challenge that we face at this moment in time. My commitment to help leave a legacy in Oregon is rooted on my desire to call on what's best here about Oregon and Oregonians. Together, I am convinced that we will rise above this recession, and together we will make the investments and the choices necessary to build a better and brighter future for ourselves and for our children to follow. Thank you.
Thank you, Governor. Mr. Dudley, please.
Thank you. Is this good to go? Can you hear me? I want to thank everybody. I want to thank the LOC for putting this on today. And I want to thank you all for the public service that you provide your communities. I want to thank the mayors, council members, city councilors, on for the service that you provide. And I realize how challenging it can be in the best of times, and especially how difficult it is during these tough economic times. And I applaud your dedication to making Oregon a better place in which to live, work, and to raise a family. Now, I see a lot of familiar faces in here, and I had the opportunity of visiting communities in each of our 36 counties these past months. And Oregon is a divided state in some ways. We are a diverse state. We are rural, we are urban, we're suburban. We are Republicans, independents, Democrats. We're even ducks and beavers. Yeah. But what I have found in traveling the state, however, is that rather than what divides us, what is more important is what unites us. We are united in our love of this state, united in the belief that we live in a special corner of the world. We are also united in concern that our elected officials these past 20 years have taken us to a point that we don't want to be. That our state is not living up to its potential, in fact, far from it. But above all, we are united in the knowledge that Oregon can do so much better, that our best days can be ahead of us. And it is that belief is the reason that I am running for governor. It is the belief that our state is not ungovernable, our problems are not unsolvable, that we can create an atmosphere where we have family wage jobs across all regions of our state. We can have a government that lives within its means and spends its taxpayer dollars wisely and efficiently. We can have the world-class schools and universities that our kids deserve. And we can have a government where partisan politics is pushed aside to do what is right for our state. We can do that. We can do that. But it's going to take us to go in a new direction. And I've outlined proposals on government reform, job creation, and education to point us in that new direction, the new direction that we must head. And I look forward to sharing them with you today, as well as the issues that face your individual cities. And I look forward to working with you come this January, working together, working with all Oregonians, and making Oregon's comeback a reality. Thank you.
Thank you all for your opening remarks. We'll now move on to the questions. So the first question, Balancing the state budget. State faces a continuing budget challenge. Many estimates foresee a continuing imbalance between the projected cost of current state programs and projected revenues, resulting in those continuing challenges to produce a balanced state budget. How do you propose to solve the state's fiscal crisis? We ask you to be specific about both revenue and expenditure changes, and are there specific programs that you would suggest or support for downsizing or elimination? And we'll start this order with Mr. Wagner.
Thank you. Is my mic? There we go. Thank you. As we all know, Oregon's facing a major financial crisis, and it's no small part about the fact that our nation is facing a major financial crisis. We see our wages declining, we see employment going down, we see the demand for the most vital of public services increasing as a result. And I anticipate this trend will actually continue, because our government has grown unsustainably large. There's absolutely no rate of taxation or increase in productivity that will actually service our current debts. And as a result, we are stuck in the spiral of having to continually borrow in order to just get budgets to balance at the end of each year. We have been indebted to the point where we have actually reached insolvency. The only difference is it hasn't been recognized yet because our creditors haven't cut off the tap. Simply, the math really does not work. And so we really need to look at what we need to do as a state in order to live with what we're capable of producing today, be creative in the ways that we manage our current obligations. And honestly, the worst thing we could possibly do is go another 4 years like this, putting more people on unemployment, more people on public assistance, to the point where at the moment our creditors cut us off is at the moment when we have the greatest need. And that is the destination where we will go if we do not stop our addiction to borrowing. As far as downsizing our government, it's going to have to be done. And it's going to mean that there will be things that will have to simply go away. There will be radical cuts that need to be made. For example, our current Oregon public school system, we've reached the point where more than half of our staff are administrative and non-educating members of the actual team. Our bureaucratic administration is over 50%, and it needs to be cut dramatically if we're going to make our schools solvent. We look at Oregon PERS. It's a system that was designed from its incept with insolvency. An 8% annual return guaranteed with absolutely no risk discounting would never work. It was designed from its beginning to fail, and thus our deficits in it continue to grow. And we can either recognize this today and work to find something that is sustainable, or we can kick the can down the road some more and allow somebody after they've come to the end of their life and after they've already retired to be told, I'm sorry, the state coffer's completely empty and we can't pay you anything. That's the future that we need to be very careful about today to avoid. As far as minor agencies, we can look at things like abolishing the OLCC and turning administration of those taxes over to local municipalities. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Governor Kitzhaber.
Well, the bad news is we have a $3 billion budget deficit. The good news is we have about the same amount of money going forward as we had in the last biennium. So I think the challenge is not to view this as a cutting exercise, but rather taking the resources we know we have and investing them differently going forward to create a different future for Oregon downstream. About a third of the deficit is due to personnel costs, and about a two-thirds is due to something else, other things. So we do have to get our arms around personnel costs through aggressive collective bargaining, dealing with the employer pickup for PERS, the employer contribution, things like COLAs and step increases, and certainly employee contribution to health care. But beyond personnel costs, we have to recognize that 93% of the general fund is spent in three areas: education, 52%, human services, 25%, and public safety, 16%. So we need to try to manage those resources differently going forward in each of those large areas, which essentially are going to be flat funded. In education, we need to consolidate our budgeting to a single unified education budget that changes the funding formula from paying institutions based on enrollment to funding students based on performance. We need to reduce redundancies in ESDs and think about consolidation of school districts. and we need to look at those social service programs that are in DHS that might more effectively be organized at the school district level. In the Department of Human Services, we're going to have to set some tough priorities based on protecting the most vulnerable citizens, making sure that we don't take services away from people who will just end up in a more expensive care setting like a nursing home or a hospital, how many federal matching dollars are available. And we also have to look for federal flexibility to spend federal dollars in a way that makes more sense in terms of Oregon. On public safety, we're going to have to reduce middle management and probably reduce the size of the non-security workforce. And we're going to have to review our sentencing policies for nonviolent offenders. None of those things are going to be easy. But I think we should remind ourselves that every state in the nation is facing exactly the same thing, and the federal government is facing it on a much larger scale. But the feds can push the difficult political decisions into the national debt, essentially running up a big bill on our kids' credit card. Thank goodness we can't do that here. And I think we have a moment before us in Oregon to manage our way through this budget in a different way and see the next biennium as the foundation for rebuilding Oregon over the next decade through a serious reinvestment strategy that lays the foundation next year and then shows how we're going to spend each new dollar as it comes back to rebuild our system of public education, our economy, and our important social services. Somewhere in America, a state has to be able to demonstrate that you can manage through a budget crisis like this without losing your sense of community and come out the other side more united and more focused and intentional than you were before. If you can't do it in Oregon, you can't do it anywhere, and I know we can do it right here in the state of Oregon.
Thank you. Mr. Dudley.
Well, make no doubt about it, we are facing a fiscal crisis. As Governor Kulongoski said, we're driving off a budgetary cliff. We're facing a $3.3 billion shortfall. But don't be fooled. This didn't happen overnight. It didn't just happen. This was the process of 20 years, a lack of leadership and failed policies that brought us to this position today. We are in a position, if we look at where Oregon is today, we're ranked 43rd in education, 42nd in employment, 40th in job growth. We're among the national leaders in hunger, national leaders in homelessness. It's not working. The verdict is in. And those are relative numbers. People will say, well, the national economy is bad. And it absolutely is. But when you're 42nd, that means there's 41 other states that are facing the same national economy that you are and are doing a better job. We have to go in a new direction from where we've gone these past 20 years. We simply have no choice. And the answer cannot always be more taxes. It needs to be more taxpayers. For too long, job growth has been an afterthought in the state of Oregon. That's why we're 42nd. We need to go in a different direction. To get out of our fiscal crisis, we have to approach it from two sides. Number one, private sector job growth. And that I will go into more detail later, and I've outlined a 20-point plan for job growth in our state. The second area is on the size of government. We are on an unsustainable path. Our revenues actually will increase from roughly $14.2 billion to $15.1 billion over the next biennium, 13% increase. But we cannot afford the 26% increase that we're slated for. We have to budget off of what we really have, what revenues are, not our wish list. Just like families do and businesses do across the state of Oregon. We have to prioritize where our dollars are going. We have to make hard decisions. We have to look, what is the role of government? We have to focus in the core areas, and maybe other areas we can't do any longer. Maybe, for example, the government doesn't even sell alcohol anymore. Look at different ways of resetting, resizing our government. We also are going to have to make hard choices in other areas as well. We're going to have to deal with labor costs. That is something, but we're going to have to do it in a fair manner. Fair manner. And I have said from day one, I will not demonize or I will not scapegoat state workers. My mother is a retired teacher. My sister is a teacher. State workers, police officers, firefighters provide a great service to our state. It is the system that needs to be adjusted. And right now, total compensation and labor costs, which, by the way, are 75% of our general fund, 75% of our general fund expenditures are on labor costs, are slated to go up between 13 and 15% in the next 2 years. So in a reasonable, fair manner, we have to talk about total compensation and how we can bring that number down. Bring that number down. And then we're going to have to go forward and make cuts in other areas as well and look at what we're going to do for our future. One of the reasons that we are... Oh,
it's time. Thank you very much.
I forgot where to take it.
Mr. Corey.
Thank you. First things first, we need to know where we are right now. So I would strongly encourage an independent audit of our Treasury. There have been extreme variations of what has been reported with regards to Oregon's finances. Statements were released that we had a $3.3 billion surplus in various accounts, and then we were told we had a $2.4 million deficit. We need an accurate accounting and communication about what is and what is not. Concerning PERS, we must sit down and negotiate the promises that were made with little or no foresight of where the finances would come from. Through greed and self-centeredness, we the people have been bound to an unsustainable agreement. If we cannot negotiate the PERS issue and come up with a reasonable, sustainable solution that will benefit us all, then we will all lose and the state will become insolvent. This is just common sense. Oregon is on fire economically. The sprinkler systems have been disabled and the alarms are just deafening. Business failures, unemployment, foreclosures continue to increase. State budgeting has been based on revenue predictions. That's irresponsible behavior. It should be budgeting for required expenses and banking the surplus. As Oregon's governor, I will institute departmental rewards for spending less than budgeted while maintaining quality of service matrix. Based on my current understanding of the Oregon Comprehensive Annual Financial Reports, I see a critical need to examine departmental budgets on a case-by-case basis. Departments need to be scrutinized to see if they are obsolete. If they are, they need to be eliminated. If there is any duplication within departments, it must be merged or downsized. And if departments can be privatized, they should. One suggestion has been the Yellow Pages test. It's a relatively simple test. If it's found in the Yellow Pages, then the private sector is already doing it, and probably doing it for less. If that is the case, then the department needs to be thoroughly looked at and considered for privatization. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. So we move on to question 2, local government partnerships. The state, counties, and cities have shared responsibilities to the citizens of Oregon. Most citizens expect government to address needs and issues without compartmentalizing the responsibilities of the solution to one level of government or the other. As an example, citizens don't differentiate between state, county, and city roads. They expect them to connect, to be maintained, and be safe without caring which unit of government is responsible for a specific road. So the questions are, what do you see as the appropriate relationship between state, cities, and counties? Describe in detail how you would plan to include local government in your decision-making process. And would you commit to meet with the League of Oregon Cities Board of Directors? So we'll start with Governor Kitzhaber, please.
Well, clearly, as you pointed out, I don't think individual citizens recognize where their services actually come from. Law enforcement is a great example. When you pick up the phone and dial 911, you want to make sure somebody shows up. I think that state, local, and city governments really are part of a common infrastructure designed to provide services to the citizens of the state of Oregon. And probably more than any other time, we need to have a collaborative relationship because of the decrease in revenues. When I was governor, as you recall, we had regular meetings with the League of Oregon Cities. We briefed you, and I was briefed by you before trade missions. We had a very good open working relationship. But more importantly, we developed an institutional structure that tried to make the state government a partner and a supporter of local government activities, and that was the Community Solutions Team, which involved the 5 agencies that have the biggest impact on how communities develop: housing, transportation, economic development, land use, and economic development. And so what we would do is we'd go in and we'd find out what the economic development objectives of a community were, or what the community development objectives of the community were. So for example, right across in downtown Springfield, they had a vision for how they wanted to revamp their downtown and revitalize their community. And instead of having Springfield look around and find a state agency that could help, we gathered all the agencies at the local community solutions team to see what they could contribute to actually make that work. I think given these difficult economic times, that model, which was extraordinarily effective and which still exists today in the Oregon Solutions model, which continues to provide those kinds of solutions throughout the state, needs to be much more focused on economic development and job creation. As we talked about earlier, 80% of the jobs in Oregon are in or are created in cities. So adding a much more robust economic development component to that, I think, is absolutely essential. And I know we're going to talk about this a little bit more, but I don't think when we talk about our system of public finance, we can't forget that half our cities are in compression right now, that about another half are moving into compression, and unless we can figure out a way to address stable local government finance, cities and counties, it's going to be very, very difficult to provide those local services that are ultimately the foundation for local economic development and job creation.
Thank you very much, Governor. Mr. Dudley.
Well, I would look forward to meeting with the LOC directors on a regular basis, and I think that's would do something absolutely, without question, that you would do. As I've traveled the state and visited 36 counties in the primary, met with elected officials, town halls, meeting weeks, and gone back several times since, a common theme came out, which was that so much of the state feels left out. So much of the state feels that they don't have a seat at the table and their voice is not being heard. And it's no wonder the trust in government is at a historic all-time low. I'm going into states where they're saying the governor hasn't stepped foot in their state in 5 years. And there's just this lack of connection. And it doesn't matter. I was in Eastern Oregon last week talking with people there, and they would raise these issues, and I would say, well, it's the same thing I hear in Central Oregon, Southern Oregon, and the coast. So it's important that we start to restore that trust, restore that communication, and realize that we're partners. The cities, counties, and state, I view it as a partnership. Not junior partners, equal partners. Equal partners. And that is important going forth because we share the responsibilities to serve Oregonians with the essential services that they need. Equal partners. And part of partnership, in my eyes, partnerships comes out of 3 components. Number 1 is trust. Number 2 is specific assignment of responsibilities. And 3 is accountability. And I will work with you in creating that environment in which we can succeed together. And I've mentioned these areas in my plans, in government reform and job creation. I've talked about, as governor, I think the role of governor is to spend as much time outside the Capitol as you do inside the Capitol. I've pledged to visit each of the 36 counties at least once a year to listen to your concerns. To me, it feels funny that you even have to say that, but it's something that hasn't been done in 20 years. Going forward, I will make sure, and I was specific in my plans, that no unfunded mandates. As governor, I do not want an unfunded mandate from the federal government to the state of Oregon, and I will not hand them down to the cities and counties either. I've also outlined a proposal, second proposal in my 20-point jobs plan, in which we work with cities in a partnership, local governments in a partnership for job creation. The way it works today, you give up the local taxes in order to recruit businesses to your counties or cities. And right now, that means that the cities and counties are losing that revenue while the state benefits from the personal income. I've said that going forward, that if we use tax abatements to bring in new businesses to the counties or cities, that we're going to share the personal revenue. That's what partners do. That's what partners do, and I see this as a true partnership, and I look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Cord.
American governments are instituted among men deriving their just powers by the consent of the governed, placing the American citizens in the foundational position of a constitutional organizational chart. All elected officials have a constitutional duty to express the desires of the people for a better community. Municipal governments are to communicate and, when necessary, coordinate the people's desires with the state. In other words, state government should be involved as little as possible in the local affairs. Coordination is essential in the operation of governmental entities, meaning city governments must be honored and respected by county and state governments, as well as county governments being honored and respected by state government. Citizens of the cities and counties are the backbone of Oregon and must be empowered with the decision-making authority. The primary decision-making process should always be at the local level. State governments should only get involved when absolutely necessary, as determined by the local government. And yes, I look forward to meeting with the LOC Board of Directors in order to establish a good working relationship by which we can build a stronger, more stable Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Ford. And lastly, Mr. Wagner, please.
I firmly believe that one of the most efficient forms of governance is distributed governance. You, as leaders of the cities that you represent, you are far closer to the people that you serve. They are closer to you. You understand their needs greater than anyone in Salem, Oregon, at the state legislature or sitting in Mahonia Hall could ever truly comprehend. I rely on you to actually be that liaison, to express those requirements in a way that is clear, in a way that is productive. And were I governor, I would have an extremely open office. I even question why the question would even have to be asked, would a governor meet with the LOC board? I'd be interested in meeting with the individual members. I'd take that time. I mean, everybody's needs are different. And although the board, together, you all help each other to try to deal with common needs, you all have individual needs as well. You have individual issues with state governance. You have individual issues where your cities were treated unfairly, that there's issues of equity to resolve. And I see the governor's office as being capable of running an extremely good organization to help address those issues and ensure that they get corrected. So were I governor, I would have an extremely open office. Anyone would be able to walk in with a very serious issue and say, this is not working, and let's put together a plan to resolve it. And I would be there to make sure that it happens.
Thank you very much. Round 3, shared revenue commitments. That's a sign. That's a sign. State shared revenues represent a historical commitment by the state to local governments. Preemptions on city-county liquor, cigarette, 911, and gasoline taxes were imposed by the state along with the state's promise to share state-collected revenues from those sources. These distributions have been vital to cities' ability to meet the increased demand for local services, including alcohol-related incident responses, traffic impacts, and other public safety issues. Recently, the liquor tax was increased without honoring that historical split, even though the vast majority of alcohol law-related enforcement is undertaken by city police, and cities receive far less alcohol tax revenues than they expend in alcohol-related law enforcement. As governor, will you support cities' right to state shared revenues and pledge to veto any cuts to city and county state shared revenues for any increases to alcohol, cigarette, 911, or gasoline taxes that do not honor the current state shared revenues formula? Mr. Dudley.
Well, yes, I will respect the historic agreements that are in place, and I will pledge to veto anything that unfairly takes money from the cities for the state's needs. I think that's something that we've seen recently, where this hasn't been done. And by that I mean we need to make sure that we are partners at the table. And an example there would be, for me, 66-67, where one side we did not bring everybody to the table, and thus we had something that absolutely ripped our state apart. No matter which, I have friends on both sides of the issue, But it absolutely ripped our state apart, and we should have had strong leadership come in, broker a deal that had everybody at the table. And that's what we need going forward. We need that strong leadership. And I've outlined specifically that no unfounded mandates would be passed down in my administration. We are partners. You provide essential services to the citizens of Oregon. We work together in that partnership, and I think that's very, very important. Getting back to it, the answer to me is jobs. Again, we have to create jobs in the state of Oregon, and that's why my #1 priority as governor is to create jobs. Job growth is the answer that we need to focus on. And we need to be partners in the way that we focus on job growth. I personally am a believer that government doesn't create jobs. We don't want to borrow more money, stretch out the credit card further to create temporary jobs. We want to create an environment in which jobs can be created. Our reputation here in Oregon has been tarnished. We need to restore that reputation. We need to make Oregon a place again where people will invest, restore capital, competitiveness, and confidence to the state of Oregon. And it is jobs, and we will be partners in doing that. And I look forward to working with you, and I've said also that we will do so in a way that we share the revenue, because I realize that when new jobs come in, that there's new infrastructure needs, new needs from the cities and counties. And so it makes sense that we share that revenue, that we truly are partners. And I look forward to working with you.
Thank you. We'll go now to Mr. Cord.
Thank you. You know, when I say I'm going to do something, I do everything in my power to carry that through. Integrity is an essential part of any relationship. It's crucial with my wife and children. It establishes the basis for an ongoing relationship. If the state is going to have a good relationship with the municipalities, then it is going to have to take work and trust, something that unfortunately gets abused all too often. Increasing the liquor tax without honoring the agreement to share the increased revenue was obviously a breach of understanding and trust between the state and the municipal governments. Shared revenue commitments must be honored. As governor, I will work with the legislature to ensure, using veto power if necessary, that past agreements between state and all municipalities are upheld. I believe trust between all levels of government is foundational and must therefore be reestablished and maintained. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Wagner.
It's not during times of plenty when people's ethics are truly challenged, but it's when resources are scarce and people are becoming desperate. Our legislators obviously were faced with budget issues. They have their pet projects. They have the promises that they made to the people who got them into office. And they made a very short-sighted decision to breach what was essentially an issue of trust. But they are also under pressure. They get unfunded mandates. They get them from the federal government all the time. And the federal government sometimes they go into debt, but oftentimes they kick the can forward into the state. If the state legislature truly had impeccable ethics, they would deal with the can. But unfortunately, there's somebody else they can kick the can to, and that's where you come in. You're going to get more unfunded mandates in the future, more than likely. And it's nice that the candidates up here on stage are promising that these things won't happen, but the legislature can override vetoes. Laws can always be rewritten. If you genuinely want a system that is equitable, I would suggest that you consider availing yourself of the initiative process to change the rules so that things like this cannot happen. You should not have to be subject to the whims of the state legislature, their decisions to redefine revenue sources, and to basically go to them with a begging hat in hand. You're closer to the people. Your authority is actually more legitimate. Even though our structure is not set up that way, you have the capacity to change it. More than 3/4 of the citizens of this state live within your boundaries. They understand the issues that face them, and they understand how difficult it is to have variance in your revenues when you're trying to provide vital services. They'll support you. I'll support you. This is what actually needs to happen in order to set the rules up so that the system is actually fair. And essentially what had happened was the system's broken. The state legislature has the ability to send you an unfunded mandate. And it's going to happen again, and that's what needs to stop. So I suggest that you consider using the resources that you have in this room to change the rules so that it doesn't happen again. I'd be willing to veto such things as governor. I'd be willing to introduce legislature to change it, but that's only going to last as long as the willpower is in the state legislature to abide it, and you're still going to be subject to them. So I recommend that you take this issue into your own hands and fix it for good. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Governor Kitzhaber.
Well, I would certainly veto any efforts to reduce revenue sharing, and have got in the way of the raid on the 911 fund during the special sessions of 2002. Certainly want to review any proposed increases, but my general, get to see what the circumstances for that increase are, but my general philosophy is that we should honor shared commitments between the state and local jurisdictions. I also think we need stronger controls over dedicated revenues in general. They were dedicated for a purpose, and I think raiding those purposes, those funds to deal with an immediate fiscal crisis at the state level not only breaks a trust, but also I think sets a very bad precedent. I also think in the whole area of shared revenues, we need to begin to think about shared responsibilities. In this era of fiscal limits, in areas like law enforcement, human service deliveries, we have shared revenues, but we need to think about how we could more efficiently share some of those delivery services and maybe move some of those from the state to the local level along with the funding and reduce not only the administrative overhead, but the direct relationship between those services and the communities that are receiving them. This is not an easy issue, and I think it's very important that we don't make pledges on revenue sharing that contradict with other policies. It's been discussed that we privatize OLCC. Now that is a huge whack on local revenues, particularly for law enforcement and alcohol-related incidents, and lets us very, very clear where those revenues are going to go. The cities are going to be left high and dry. I would also agree that the government doesn't create private sector jobs, but the governor can break private sector jobs, and there is in fact a robust, locally grown micro distilling industry in Oregon that's creating jobs in Oregon. Clear River Distillery, Hood River Distillery, that would be devastated by privatizing OLCC. So it's a complicated issue, but I think we need to be very clear about our priorities and make sure that our economic development objectives don't get in the way of our objectives to provide responsible revenue sharing and trust agreements with local government.
Thank you very much. Next set of questions deals with tax reform measures 5 and 50. Limitations placed on property taxes by measures 5 and 50 have resulted in the largest source of local government revenues increasing at a much lower rate than the inflation in cost to deliver those services. This has prevented local government revenue raising ability from keeping up with the cost of providing essential services to citizens. This is especially true in light of increased state mandates on employee health benefits, public contracting, etc. City use of lodging taxes adopted after July 2003 are limited by state law to only 30% of the taxes collected. Even though cities with large tourism populations see significant impacts on the demands for city services related to that tourism, many cities pay more for essential police and fire, public safety services than they raise through property taxes. We fear that the state legislature will try to balance its budget by shifting costs and passing on unfunded mandates. So we have 3 questions for you to address. Do you support allowing local voters to approve local option levies longer than the current 5-year limitation and outside the limits of compression? Would you support allowing all cities to have the ability to determine how locally raised transient lodging taxes are used? And finally, can we count on you to not shift programs and costs from the state to cities through unfunded mandates? And we'll start with Mr. Court.
Thank you. Question one, absolutely. Let's take the handcuffs off the local decision makers. As governor, my commitment to Oregonians will be to prioritize their liberty as expressed through constitutional protections. Municipal issues are best managed at the local level and through local representatives without the state interfering. Coordination needs to be implemented whenever state involvement is required. Regarding cities having the ability to determine how their transit taxes are used, absolutely. We are talking about municipal revenues. Elected officials should be allowed to exercise the role of the people and keep local revenues in the local community. And regarding the third question, I believe that city governments should be economically sustainable as possible without interference from state government. As governor, you can count on me to ensure that programs and costs will not be shifted from the state to the cities through unfunded mandates. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Corey. Mr. Wagner.
Thanks. Obviously, property tax is a hot issue in this state. It's led to numerous initiative petitions, many of which got signed, some struck down, others upheld. When at the core of the issue that we're facing today, however, though, is that property values are actually declining. And as much as we want to optimistically believe that we are reaching an area of the bottom of the market, I honestly believe that we probably have about another 40 to 50% to go, because that's where we would need to be in order to get to the prices that were normal compared to income and affordability before the housing bubble actually started to be blown up 30 years ago. So you're looking at needing to return to inflation-adjusted prices of what houses were 30 years ago. This means that the property tax incomes are likely to actually go down in the future as people have their homes reassessed, as the actual assessed value has finally exceeded what the real market value of the houses have become. As far as whether you should have the right to put in longer levies, increase the amounts above the normal percentages, yeah, the localities should have that right. I don't believe it was the state's, I don't believe it really was in the state's power to stop that. I think that that should be undone. However, I will caution you that it's not wise. If you are borrowing from your future yet again, and by trying to fund large projects that you cannot afford today, you are just continuing the behavior that has gotten us to where we are today. And this is like a drug junkie just looking for another hit of, we seek out another creditor, somebody will give us a little bit more just so we can make it a little bit longer. But we have to deal with these issues. And I don't believe in the future property taxes are necessarily going to be as stable of a revenue source as they used to be. And we need to start preparing for that. As far as the transient lodging taxes go, I think that honestly, a city should be allowed to charge whatever them and their local business leaders believe is fair, is going to work for everybody involved, and that the localities should keep the revenue. They understand the requirements. They're the ones who bear the burden of all the additional expenses, and I don't see limiting them as something that needs to be done. The local businesses and the local people there have the responsibility to do that, and in places where it makes sense to raise them, they should be raised in order to take up the, basically the burden that the additional services require. So, on the issue of unfunded mandates, I kind of talked a little bit about using the initiative process in the past. Honestly, I think that's your only relief here as well. It has happened, and it will happen again. It may not happen with this governor, but it could easily happen with the next. And you need a long-term solution. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Wagner. Governor Kitzhaber.
Yes, on the compression issue, I do support giving local voters the ability to extend the length of levy elections from 5 to 10 years, for example. That not only reduces the frequency of those levy elections, but it does continue to preserve local control, and it provides some much needed relief for the growth of service demand in light of the inability to raise those revenues. This is not just an issue of local government financing. This is really an issue of economic development and job creation. Those public services are absolutely essential to our private sector economy, and the ability of local governments to provide those services is essential. Secondly, on the hotel-motel tax, I do think that we need to provide additional flexibility for local jurisdictions. You have communities like Ashland, I think, as you meant, and some coastal communities that have a huge part of their budget based on tourism. And I do think they need some additional flexibility to use those resources. I think the balancing between the implications of those taxes on hotels and motels and the revenue generated is best determined. That balance is best determined at the local level, and I don't think moving to a more equitable distribution from the 70-30 that we have now is going to undermine the larger intent of the lodging tax legislation. And the third one's easy. I will definitely veto unfunded mandates should they come across my desk.
Thank you very much. Mr. Dudley.
Well, I understand the challenges that have been put in place by 5 and 50 and the struggles that communities are now undergoing on a go-forth basis. But again, I would get back to the point that now is not the time for more taxes, it's more taxpayers. And by that I mean when I'm traveling across the state and I'm in Central Oregon and I'm sitting down with the restaurant owner who points out 2 ladies who are sitting at the restaurant sharing a bowl of soup and saltines because they've been laid off. Now's not the time when people want more taxes. It's not the answer. It cannot always be the answer. And I've heard this loud and clear across the state. From the lady who works at Supercuts down the street from me, who told me that she's fearful. She's a single mother. She's fearful that she's getting priced out of her home because the taxes keep increasing on her. So I think we have to be very careful here to always go back and say the answer is more taxes. Very careful on that. We need to rebuild the trust first in government. The trust has been broken, and we must take steps to rebuild that trust. People are out there saying that we want government to get its house in order before you come back to us and adjust the revenue side. Get your house in order. Every day they're reading the paper and they're hearing about whether it be energy tax credits that went $5 million went to a company in Texas that did 1% of their business in Oregon. Whether it's stimulus dollars that re-roofed a vacant building, whether it be the investment council or whatever, travel expenses, double billing. People, there is a lack of trust out there that has to be restored first. People want to see government get its house in order just the way they have in their homes and they have in their businesses. And I've said I would honor the historic agreements. Obviously, those cut both ways. And so in that regard, I will honor the historic agreements. And I've said very clearly, would not pass along any unfunded mandates. And in fact, it was a point of mine in my policy piece because it is that important. Again, we are partners and we will work together and we'll do so in a reasonable manner. And there may come a time where it makes sense to look at different things such as the compression rates. There may come that time, but we have to do it in a thoughtful manner where we're partners. And we have to also realize where the citizens of Oregon are today in dealing with these issues. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Dudley. I think it's fitting that we close with a question on economic development. That issue's kind of been wound through the themes of each of you this afternoon. So as you know, and as you, I think, all appreciate, cities play a vital role in creating and maintaining private sector jobs, directly impacting state tax revenues. Over 80% of Oregon's jobs are located within city limits. Directly linked to the provision of jobs are necessary city services, roads, water, sewer, and a variety of other municipal services. The need for new or replacement infrastructure has grown statewide with population growth and the aging of our existing infrastructure. At the same time, resources to replace and provide new infrastructure has lagged both population growth and the need to replace the aged infrastructure. One of the issues identified recently has been the relative decline in Oregon's per capita income ranking as compared to other states. So tell us specifically what ideas you are proposing to create private sector jobs and raise the income levels of existing and new jobs for the long term. Also, we'd like you to please address how you would work with the cities of Oregon on local economic development, such as assisting with trade missions and meeting with businesses looking to locate in Oregon cities. Now, I do have to qualify that as being from Washington State. We have to exclude the Washington businesses from the table here. Okay, is that fair?
That's very fair.
So what solutions and/or new funding resources do you propose to mitigate our infrastructure crisis, especially in the area of transportation? And we'll start with Mr. Wagner.
Well, the number one thing that I think that we could do to make Oregon extremely attractive to business is to eliminate the business income taxes in this state. The reality is that businesses don't genuinely pay them. They always get transferred through. They get transferred through in the prices of products. They get transferred through in decisions whether or not to locate capital here based on return on invested capital analysis and all other sorts of issues like that. They honestly don't pay them. There's always somebody at the end of the line who's actually buying the product who generally pays that tax. And so using that system to collect that revenue is actually inefficient. It provides an administrative overhead that just increases the cost to everybody involved, and it essentially makes us uncompetitive. If we were to look at eliminating the business income taxes for any company that is actually physically headquartered or is doing business in Oregon, they would give them some stability. They would know that there isn't going to be another initiative petition another year from now that's going to change all of their financial projections and make this a bad investment for them. Businesses plan based on stability. If we give them a stable system that they can operate in, they will be interested in working here. Likewise, our infrastructure is critical. As it stands right now, there is essentially an infrastructure crisis in this country. I've seen estimates that there's more than $1 trillion of just simply unfunded maintenance that needs to be done on our national infrastructure. Even things like the St. Louis Arch. It's incredible, the amount of backlog that we have. Because it's very popular to build something new, but you have to maintain it. And one of the key things that makes our infrastructure so critical is that in the unfortunate event that our foreign creditors do cut us off, and we do need to default on our current obligations, and there is bankruptcy, our infrastructure is going to be what we have left to rebuild with. So we need to take care of it right now and today as our best hedge and insurance policy against that in the future. Not to mention that it's one of the key elements that incoming businesses look at to determine whether a state is a good place to do business in. What is the status of their infrastructure? Are their roads adequate? Are their bridges adequate? And we really need to be focusing and prioritizing to make sure that the answer to all of that is yes. As far as what this means to cities, if we attract more businesses here, even if we aren't collecting business income taxes, personal incomes will go up as the increased demand for actual laborers increases. We have one of the most educated states in the country. It'll attract the types of jobs that we need in order to get back on our own footing. And this is going to take people off of your public service roles that right now are an expense, and instead will be able to once again contribute to our state. And I suggest that you really consider this idea. Thank you.
Thank you. Governor Kitzhaber.
Well, we can learn some things from the past. During my 8 years as governor, we created 128,000 jobs. We increased our state GDP by 48% and wages and benefits by 49%. And that didn't just happen. It was a result of some intentional steps we all took following the recession of 1983, repealing the unitary tax, the single sales factor, setting up the strategic investment program, reforming Oregon's workers' compensation system. And that created the foundation for the robust economy we had in the 1990s. And that carried us right through till about 2002, the first national recession. What we need to do today is rethink our suite of incentives and programs and structures to reflect the economic challenges of the 21st century rather than the challenges of the 1990s, which are fundamentally different. Things like perhaps considering reduction in the cap on the strategic investment program to attract other types of somewhat smaller businesses into our state. Strategies to significantly reduce the cost of energy and health care. We save $14 billion for Oregon employers by reforming the workers' compensation system. Can you imagine the competitive advantage we have if we did the same thing with health care? And we clearly need to address the access to capital issue for small and medium-sized businesses. But we also need jobs now. And I believe there's a huge opportunity in large-scale energy efficiency projects, starting with our public schools, bonding against anticipated revenues, and using that to leverage private sector money from ESCOs like Johnson Controls or McKinstry and put people to work in every community in Oregon, good middle-income jobs next summer. And if we are intentional in procurement, getting our windows from gelled wind, from local community businesses, we can create a huge economic development component that'll put people back to work right now. Finally, on infrastructure, I don't have a magic solution to this, but I think we need to get on the table very soon that the gas tax is not a long-term viable source of funding transportation infrastructure in Oregon or in the United States. As cars become more efficient, as we get people out of cars into mass transit, as we do a better job designing our communities so people don't have to commute, it's going to generate less and less revenue. So we need to work closely with our congressional delegation and with our partners in the region to develop new strategies for financing critical transportation infrastructure, which is and will continue to be, I think, a cornerstone of economic growth and development for Oregon and the Northwest.
Thank you. Mr. Dudley, please.
Well, for too long in our state, jobs have been an afterthought and not a top priority. And for me, they will be a top priority. Yes, jobs were created at times, but when the population increases at a much faster rate, the unemployment rate goes up. So that's not actually creating jobs. That's why our unemployment rate has been above the national average for 14 consecutive years. 14 years, our unemployment rate in the state of Oregon has been above the national average. 172 months. Our per capita income, what Oregonians earn relative to what the rest of the country is earning, has been on the decline since 1997. We have to turn that around. We absolutely have to have a government that understands that private sector job growth has to be priority number one. We cannot afford the quality of life we want here in Oregon if we do not have jobs. We cannot continue on this same path where we're constantly above the national unemployment rate. It's unacceptable and it has to end. And I've talked about ways in which to create job growth, and I've outlined them in my 20-point plan. But it comes down to this. We need to restore confidence, capital, and competitiveness to the state of Oregon. People have to believe in Oregon again and believe it is a place to invest. And I tell people as I've traveled the state, I've been both encouraged and discouraged. Encouraged by the great people we have in this state, the passion for the state, just incredible people. But discouraged by how many people say they've had it up to here, have either moved out of our state, talking about leaving, or talking about not investing, not making that next investment. And this goes from larger business to small. The smaller business, such as the man I met who owns 2 Subway franchises, is scared to open that third. Scared to open the third in the state of Oregon. He said, what is coming next? What are 68 and 69 going to look like after 66, 67? What is coming next? What's coming down the road? I do not want to invest in this state. And we've got to turn that around. We have to make it safe to go back in the water to invest in Oregon once again. Second part, for our future, we have to invest in education. We have to have I'm a passionate believer that the education of today is our economy of tomorrow. And the third area is, again, we have to say Oregon is open for business. We have to get out of this mindset that it's us versus them. It's business versus education, government versus business. It's a false choice. We're actually on the same team. We have to work together. And that has to be changed, and that has to be changed from the top. It has to change the attitude that we've had here. I would absolutely work with cities on trade missions and bringing businesses in as a partnership. Incredibly important. I will also make sure that cities have additional revenue coming in to support those new businesses. And that's why I've talked about sharing the new jobs that come in, sharing the personal income taxes on new jobs, because we truly are partners and will work together to bring jobs to Oregon. Thank you.
Thank you. Lastly, Mr. Court.
Thank you. We must restart our economy through the ecologically sound use of our resources. We have an abundance of natural resources all around us, and yet we are starving economically due to the overregulation in Washington, D.C., and certain special interest groups that have no concern about we the people. We must renew our logging industry. In so doing, we would create jobs, not only create jobs, but well-paying careers. Among these would be engineering and construction jobs that would be needed to build the new mills. And we would have the logging and mill jobs that Oregonians used to have and be proud of. We must look at many resources for our need of electricity. I would encourage environmentally sound biomass facilities and waste heat generators. We put much of our garbage into the ground, which affects our groundwater as well. We have the technology with these type of facilities to produce electricity that would exceed the EPA requirements as far as cleanliness goes of the air. We must utilize our rivers in a sound way by updating what we have while utilizing the best technology available. This would include state-of-the-art hydro generators and fish ladders. And I believe we've been heading back to a more desire of all natural foods. I would encourage ranchers and farmers to seriously consider growing and raising these types of products in order to meet the increasing demands. Regarding my working with cities, my goal for them is to experience economic sovereignty. Natural resource revenues will enable Oregon to compete for and attract new businesses with the goal of exporting more than we import, allowing us to meet our financial obligations, which would include restoring or rebuilding our infrastructure. The revenues generated could thereby fund services that Oregonians have come to rely upon. I am a firm believer in economic independence through prosperous family wage employment. Right now, Oregonians have an extraordinary opportunity to restore our economy if brave enough to address the challenges head on. Thank you.
Thank you, gentlemen. It's time now for our closing statements. And again, as your opening statements, I would invite you, if you choose to use the podium, however, you're very free to just stay seated where you are. So Governor Kitzhaber, you are first.
The stakes are very high in this election year, and no matter who is elected, we will make deep cuts in the Oregon General Fund budget that will affect all Oregonians. But if we act together and if we establish the right priorities, it seems to me we can emerge from this difficult time stronger than we were before, with a government that's more transparent, more effective, and more efficient in delivering the services that we need. But there isn't any time to waste. We need to recognize that people are hurting throughout the state of Oregon. They need jobs and better jobs. They need education. They need housing. They need health care. You name it. Those of you who are in this room are on the front line of service delivery. You need a governor who knows how to hit the ground running on day one, who knows how to work in partnership, and who understands what it takes to get this state moving again. My opponent has produced a lot of ideas in his literature, but about 2/3 of them increase spending with no way to pay for it, including an $800 million tax break benefiting upper-income Oregonians linked to a reduction in the minimum wage. Now, that sends a toxic message to poor working Oregonians, and it also undermines the ability to fund education, social services, and the kinds of public investments that are absolutely necessary to get our economy going again. I agree this is no time to raise taxes, but it's also no time to spend money that we don't have. We need fiscal discipline, and we need candor in how we deal with this fiscal crisis, and we need to do it in a way that builds up the confidence of our low-income working Oregonians and our confidence in the ability of the government to make investments during difficult times to actually lift this state up. With all due respect, I think experience matters, particularly in these difficult fiscal times. And I don't think we can afford to elect a governor with very little management experience, very little direct involvement in private sector job creation, and certainly a set of policies that, it seems to me, increases our fiscal deficit rather than increasing it. You have a choice in this election. I think you need a governor. When you hire a governor, you need one that knows what he's doing, that can hit the ground running. This is an important election. The stakes are very, very high in this election. And I'm asking not only for your vote today, but more importantly, on November 3rd, I'm asking for your help to make the investments and the difficult choices that we have to make together between now and the end of next to June to rebalance our budget and put Oregon back on a more sustainable path. Thank you.
Well, again, I want to thank you for the OOC for putting this together, and thank you all again for the public services that you provide to your communities. Traveling around the state and going through this process, I think back to the defining moment in my life, which occurred when I was 16 years old. So at that time, my dream was to play professional basketball. Go figure. But I got diagnosed with type 1 diabetes, which meant that I should give up on that dream. Nobody had ever played in the NBA with diabetes before. It's clear. Either we stay down the same path, which that experience has brought us to, where we're last in everything, or we decide to go in a new direction. We have to go in a new direction. The choice is clear. And I believe that our state can do so much better, and that is why I am running for governor to lead Oregon in a new direction. A new direction in which we create an environment in which jobs are created. I see an Oregon that provides family wage jobs. I see an Oregon that has a government living within its means, where people trust it. I see an Oregon that understands that the education of today is our economy of tomorrow, and that we reach to have the best schools and universities and community colleges that we can. I also see an Oregon where governor and legislature actually work together, put partisanship aside, to work together to deal with the hands that are facing Oregonians today. Now, it's not going to be easy. It's not going to be easy. We have some tough choices, but we have to go in a new direction because we've seen where this experience has taken us. Here we are. We are living in the future that experience has taken us. We need to go in a new direction, and we need to do so quickly. I encourage you to look at my plans and proposals. Visit chrisdudley.com. Please I encourage you to join my campaign as well. And at the end of the day, we will prove that Oregon is not ungovernable. It can be unstoppable. Thank you.
I would like to thank the generous hosts of today's forum and my fellow candidates. I firmly believe Oregonians must take immediate action to restore our freedoms and take back control of our God-given rights and opportunities. We must be a sovereign state, as the Constitution clearly expresses. A state that possesses an independent existence, being complete in itself. We must secure our borders and stop the roughly 270,000 illegal aliens costing Oregonians approximately 135,000 jobs at an essential cost of $830 million per year, estimated cost, I'm sorry. We must also get our state budget under control. We need a comprehensive audit of our state finances. We also need a performance audit to determine if the money being spent by each department is giving us our best return. The industries and jobs that I have mentioned are long-term family wage jobs that I believe will sustain and prosper Oregon for many years and put us on the right track to economic recovery. I would encourage reopening those jobs that have been lost long ago due to certain special interest groups. I believe the incredible resources that Oregon has been blessed with can infuse our economic growth for the long term. I believe that the opening up of the logging, fishing, mining, ranching, farming communities would prosper us beyond belief. These employment-creating careers will expand Oregon's economic prosperity into the municipalities so Oregon can once again fly with her own wings without the need of federal government's conditional subsidies. Much more needs to be said, but time does not allow. Our state needs a fresh start. We cannot afford the tax and spend or borrow and spend agendas. These actions have placed us in the situation we find ourselves. Much more needs to be done, and all of it requires common sense, which I submit to you is different than being politically correct or charismatic. I'm Greg Cord, the Common Sense, Back to Basics, and Constitutional Party candidate for governor, and I would appreciate your support. Thank you.
A lot of good ideas here today, a lot of issues expressed. We have a lot of challenges that we face today, and I anticipate that the future challenges that we will face will be even greater. We need to look together at how we can work through these issues. It is becoming obvious, even from the material presented by all the candidates here tonight, that there's areas of a lot of agreement, that we're facing an oncoming crisis of our budgets, that new taxes are probably not going to work. Likewise, I'm not sure that new tax cuts are necessarily going to stimulate the economy as they've been promised that they would do so many times before. We cannot tax our way to prosperity. We cannot borrow our way to prosperity. We cannot create a prosperity out of accounting ledgers or derivative contracts or any of the chicanery that the financial parasites in our system have used over the last several decades to steal it from us. We have to produce our way to prosperity. We need to bring back industry. We need to have our agriculture producing to its utmost in an effective, environmentally responsible way that protects our land, prevents erosion, allows our infrastructure to be maintained, does not in any way, shape, mortgage our future. We have been too good at mortgaging our futures. For a long time there, Mr. Reagan talked about, well, we don't want to mortgage our grandchildren's future. When people start saying we don't want to mortgage our children's future, the reality is that our future was already mortgaged. We're there. There's nothing left to mortgage anymore, and we have to rebuild our way out of this. We have made a bed at this point in time, and no amount of delusion will change the facts that what is coming down the road is a lot more severe than what you even see today. We are insolvent. Our country's bankrupt. We've mortgaged away our entire future. It's now time to rebuild. Let's take care of our infrastructure. Let's take care of each other. Let's take care of our communities. And let's actually practice the ethics that we have not practiced for a long time. And that's going to be the way that we get out of it. And my name's Wes Wagner. I'm the Libertarian Party candidate for governor. I don't have a $5 million campaign budget, so a lot of you may have not even heard of me before today. I can guarantee you that anybody who has a $5 million campaign budget probably has a lot of strings attached to it. And that represents where we've come from and why we are where we are today. Those people expect a return on investment of some form. That's why they did it. We need to do something different. If what you are doing is not working, do something different. Otherwise, like I said in my opening remarks, we're basically engaging in insanity. Thank you.